I'm sorry that Klaus Vogelgesang is not with us, because I wanted to start with his big drawings, but we will get an overview of the art scenes in West Berlin now. I'll show you just some examples, and then we will discuss with the artists. And I start with Verism, and Expressionism comes later. It's interesting that in the beginning of the 70s, in Germany, they started to rethink the 1920s. And there was a festival in London. It was called the 70s Meet the 20s. That was in the ICA in 1978. And as Maija Tabaka came to West Berlin, it was just this time. It was 1977, 78. So we had a big exhibition on the tendencies of the 1920s, for example. It was in the National Gallery, in the Academy of Arts, and that was on all, you know, the Neue Sachlichkeit, New Objectivity, Verism, and Expressionism, Dadaism, Surrealism. So it was a real rediscovery of the 1920s. Because, you know, we had the time between the black years, 1933 to 1945, and they had a big campaign against modernism, the degenerate art. So this was forgotten. And there was abstraction after the war as the only symbol for freedom and for the West against the East. The East was connected with social realism, and so the art world was very simplified in these two blocks, West and East. And in the 1970s, it changed. We also started to look towards the East, and there was an exhibition in West Berlin on constructivism and Soviet art of the 1920s, also in 1977. So you see, this time it was a real change, and Maija Tabaka came exactly in that time to West Berlin. So she was confronted with all these new discovered art tendencies, and there was a group of artists from the 1960s. They started with a self-help gallery and tried to promote their realism against this dogma of abstraction and conception art. And what I show you now is very typical for West Berlin. It's a big drawing by Klaus Vogelgesang, and you see this typical elder lady from West Berlin. Maybe she was a Trümmerfrau, and you see has this spear. This is a symbol of Berlin, and we have the Memorial Church, the Gedächtniskirche in the background. And you see a little bit of the Egon Eiermann new building beside. So that was something she definitely has seen. And here you see Strauss, that was a Minister of Defense, and this German Schäfer dog, and very cut off montage and so on, and a mixture of new objectivity. And the next is here, you see this boy has a Hitler haircut, and this old man. So I come now to Ulrich Beer, and he is one of the artists who was really tracing the body language of politicians, the body language of the power. You see here the Olympia Stadion with these sculptures from the NS and the Nazi time, and you see the torso, the German torso, which he calls German torso. This is really in a plastic form, but very flat, and you see parts, fragments of Adolf Hitler's body language, with this keeping the head here and keeping the hands before his Geschlecht, sex, penis, or coming down. Yeah. So, and this here, you remember, it's part of the exhibition. This is a wonderful, also body language. And it's also, of course, hitting to the situation in Berlin. Berlin was the capital of the Cold War, and it's 5 people sitting in front of the gate to the paradise. And there is typical for these studios. They were collecting news photographs, cuttings from newspapers, and of course it's reminding to Yalta and Potsdam. And you have this palm tree here on the right is Mao. We have twice Stalin and prisoner from the Gulag and so on. So I just show you a last example by Ulrich Beer. This is Mr. K, 11 o'clock in the morning, and he is exercising, shooting exercises. And it's very fascinating when you remember this painting was done in 1977, about the time of Maija Tabaka's. And later, much later, about 30 years later, in the magazine Die Zeit, published this photograph of Heinz Kurras. And Heinz Kurras was the murderer of Benno Ohnesorg. And you remember, we just commemorated that exactly 50 years ago in 1967, on the 2nd of June, we had this arrest against the Shah of Iran, and there was a demonstration before the Opera House. The Shah was sitting inside watching the Figaro by Mozart, and outside he was part of a civil guards who shooted this student, Benno Ohnesorg, who was really without any weapon. He was fleeing, he was trying to escape, and he was shooting. And you see him in the same position as Ulrich Beer painted this man 30 years ago. So this is part of this body language, and you see the artists were very much engaged in this student movement. And oh, sorry. And the third artist, then, at the same time, but it's earlier, it's Johannes Krützke. But first, I would say, Ulrich, can you tell us how you came to this position of this Mr. K, Herr K, members also to Brecht?
Well, I can swear that I didn't know this picture. The guy I depicted was a teacher, colleague of mine. At that time, I used to teach in a school, in a high school, and he was a teacher for physics and stuff like that. And he showed me he was an amateur shooter, and he used to shoot. And so this is a crazy story. It's absolutely the same gesture and the same time, but nobody knew that this guy, this policeman who shot the student Benno Ohnesorg, which detained actually the student revolt in Berlin and in Germany. He was later revealed as an agent of the Stasi, the Secret Service from East Berlin. He was infiltrated into the West Berlin police to be an agent. And that's 30 years later, just some years ago, it was revealed. So this is an absolute crazy story. Well, I don't know which spirit inspired me to paint this person in this position, but it's absolutely nothing to do with this policeman. Actually, I did 4 variations of this colleague, this teacher, in 4 different stages of shooting, and added a brother, invented brother, you know, it was a sort of serious film stills, like that. I would say the time when Maija was in Berlin, and I had the honor to be her neighbor in this artist, my studio was next door. It was a time between 2 epochs. The revolt was over. The students' revolt was actually over 10 years ago, and declined into terrorism partly. And the next, I think what you see in the exhibition, the art of this period is somehow it's so diverse and so it's so it has no unique line. No, it's just a time of searching for style. Then comes a new generation, more inspired by, I think, by music, by punk and by rock music, and not by students' movement and by political reasons, more by cultural, by this dechainment of punk music and so on.
Can you remember that Maija saw your paintings? Did you explain her? Did you talk with her about your, when she came to your studio, you were neighbors?
She was very discreet. We didn't discuss art very much, I think, and actually, but you know her better than I do. By example, she was a sort of mysterious person, very impressive, and very discreet, and well, she and that's why she was. That's why she seemed to be. She was exotic because she was the first artist from the Soviet realm in Western in Berlin, which was absolutely unique. So there was mystery around her, which is probably one source of her art too.
Yeah, that was really a mystery around her, and we see that in the paintings. So I come to another artist who recently died much too early. That's Johannes Krützke. And you can see, when you see this work here, it's Benno Ohne Sorg Gets His Gun from 1968. That the artists of this generation, that was the same generation as the student movement, they were also with some irony and some distance looking to these events, to these happenings. And Krützke, evidently fearing objections to this painting, and there were a lot of objections, I remember, of some of the activists of the student movement against this painting, he said, because I paint only from my own mirror, I disarm all those who accuse me of laughing at others in my work. It is always me, and I do not see the world better or worse than myself. So this is the background. This is also another part of the Berlin scene. It's not the verism, it's a kind of, I call them neue Prächtigkeit, a kind of surrealism or ironic distance. Also, the body language is very important. Like this painting with Stutzke and Ohne Sorg on his back. But you see, these all are the same faces. The faces are all from Johannes Krützke. When he painted, he had always a mirror beside his staffelei and scaffold, and then he was always looking in his face when he painted these painting like that, with many persons on it. And this is another one, Valeska Gerd. It's very typical for Krzyzke. It brings up also the 20s, because she was a grotesque dancer, which is also part of the 20s, and she was still in West Berlin after the war and had a cabaret, and she is sitting in her bed mountains here. And yeah, you see Fostel now, this famous painting by Maija Tabaka, the family of Fostel. He had a wonderful house, wonderful apartment in West Berlin, Charlottenburg, and it was a meeting point. You can see a film here with him. And this is his art. He was trying also, you see, it's a kind of collage. It's called Nouveau Realist, the affichist, taking up things, taking away from posters. This is a typical German CDU, German Democratic Union, election party poster. And so he's mocking, you see the Brandenburg Gate in the middle. And this is another important painting he did in the 60s already, that was reflecting the Auschwitz trial. It was the beginning, really, in 1963, of rethinking the past, which was forgotten in the 50s. And a quotation of one of the witnesses in the trial, "Wir waren so eine Art Museumsstück," meant that the Soviets, prisoners of war, were very rare in this camp, is taken up. But what you see in front of this paper from the FAZ in the background is the present. The violence is not finished with Auschwitz. It's going on. You have the 7th of June, you have Kennedy assassination, you have demonstrations against Strauss, and so on. So this is another one, also a collage. And I show that just to come to this other famous painting of Maija Tabaka, which I mentioned yesterday in my speech. This is Wie heißt du? What is your name? And you see how she is working with this collage principle, and you see this fragments of the city. You remember she said, I can't find a location where this is West Berlin, like that maybe in Riga or in other cities. So she made this combination of this beer pencil, of this tower at the highway, and you see the subway entrance, and you see also the skyscrapers and the churches. And this is coming from Germany again. This is George Goss, the city from 1917. It's in the middle of the First World War. It's showing the city like a battlefield. And you see there's futurism, it's expressionism, but this is a very famous painting which was very influential for the city metropolis paintings in the 20s, but also then in the 80s. And another one is from Felix Müller. He's showing also the situation of the big city, of the metropolis. And you see Walter Reiner, it was a friend of Felix Müller. He was a poet, an expressionist poet, and he is drug addicted. You see he has his, in the hand, is putting his shot, and is in the trance, falling down from his window with the flowers here in this mouth of the big city. And this is coming up now by Helmut Mittendorf, 20s, but it's taking up this looking for adventure, for the night adventure. And this is Hödecke. He was a teacher of them. He was a teacher of this group. You see them all in the exhibition. That's Zimmer, it's Mittendorf, it's Fetting, and many more. And Barbara Quandt will tell you, because she is part of this movement. That's why I'm coming now to this neo-expressionism. And Hödecke is just giving the cityscapes, and he was a teacher So Middendorf again, with this, and the ultramarine blue Kreuzberg, this night feeling is here, or Fetting with Van Gogh at the big elevated subway, elevated train, or at the walking along the wall. On the right side you see Martin Gropiusbau. It's a big exhibition house now. And this is East Berlin, Tragwendisch. The other side took up the same feeling, the same idea against socialist realism also. And you see this pair dancing on the rope over the Spree. And on the one side you see it's East Berlin, and down here is Kreuzberg. So now I will finish with that. And it's just a last example is Fetting, Man Under the Shower. And it's also, of course, quoting ironically this painting by Kirchner, which is done in the First World War. He was in the war for a short time, but then he got a nervous breakdown. And this is the shower, the soldiers under the shower, and heating this oven. And they are very anxious. You can see that in the eyes. It's a totally different idea. So see, it's not just copying the expressionism of the First World War and after. It's ironically quotating and changing the idea and the feeling. And I think Barbara Quandt can authentically tell this feeling, maybe about this feeling or about this time, because she is part of this movement in the 80s.
With social realism, and then when Hödecke came to my teacher, then I changed. The painting was more free, and then I go to London with a grant, and then for me the punk music I was very influenced from the people with punk and the music, and I'm not so often painting houses and the streets. I like people, and so I was concentrated to paint punk people. And in the exhibition, that one is the two boys that are the youth, because I was working in the prison with the youth, and I painted the youth. And the other painting, when I was on the corrugated iron, I myself was naked and wrapped with plastic foil, and yeah, that was my punk feeling. And on the corrugated iron, there were speeches from the punks, or the name from the punk group 999 was a punk. And I was very close in the city in London to the punks. And then I transported that to Berlin. And then, because this painting was influenced from London, but painted in Berlin. And so in Berlin was also a punk scene, and I dropped into, with my colleagues and other artists, into the punk scene, and it goes further and further.
Did you meet Maija Tabaka? No. But you were, for you was the music very important. SO36 for the 36 is music from in the Oranienstraße. Was that for you? The SO36. Yes. This, where or Kippenberger was for a while. In Berlin, they make music with Schechtele. Schechtele also is in the exhibition. Photography. maybe I just show an example of Kippenberger, because the melancholy is also a very important part of German art history and culture. And you know this Dürer here, and Dürer's self-portrait, and he is sick of love because he's laughing but without reason and hope. And this is Gross here in the cafe. The dog here is also on the Dürer, and you find in his heart, under his heart, a pistol. And so I come to Middendorf, and they take up also the melancholy. That's something what I also wanted to ask you then, why the melancholy is such an important topic also of the 80s. We always think, oh, that was music and it was happy and a party forever. But on the other side, you see Middendorf here in this pose of a melancholist, and you see Angela Hampel, it's in Dresden, in the East, in East Germany, in the same time, a self-portrait in this pose of melancholy, and Hubertus Giebe, also an artist from Dresden, or Peuker, and here Oehlen, Albert Oehlen, with a scarf on his arm and the palette. And here it's Büttner, Werner Büttner, in the cinema, onanierend, and this is Kippenberger. And Kippenberger used to write letters or doing drawings on hotel paper, and this Wiener Staatsoper here in the background. And it's interesting that he takes Géricault's Medusa. You see, this is the man in front seeing a boat who could save them. And then he's coming back with this melancholy pose again. And this is Else Gabriel in East Berlin, who did that. She's part of the autoperforative artists and is putting her head in blood. Okay, this is just because we talked about Kippenberger. Is that also something that came across to you, this other side of...
I think this generation, they are more free. They said, okay, we don't keep what's going on, we make our own style. And like the punks, because they are not so involved in traditions, and we want to create a new tradition, also with clothes and hairstyling and music. I mean, the music was, I also played with my group, Babsi and the Crocodiles. I was singing, and another was playing saxophone, and I never was going to the school to sing, but we said, okay, we do it. There is the instruments, and I can sing. Okay, we do it.
There was a group called Geniale Dilettanten.
Right, yeah. The Tödliche Doris.
Tödliche Doris.
Yes. That was, and then we meet each other and play music, and in the jungle, Salome and Fetting was also in a group, and somebody else, I think, and played in the jungle. This is a disco in Berlin. Also, Waldes was there.
Exactly. The jungle is, you remember this painting by Maija Tabaka, and I show you the jungle is also a very important part of her work. I will show you that. Oh, it's not here. Okay, but you remember that. It's this painting she did, and you see in this painting by her this ambivalence also. She's fascinated by the drug addicts and by this strange saints and people. And on the other side, she's also a bit appalled and felt there is death and destruction hovering over this scene. It was chaos. Yeah.
By the time it was really chaos. One bar was chaos, and it was really the seats were old, the carpet was broken, and it was really it was only shit. It was create from the broken, like broken English. The scene halt.
Yeah, maybe you have questions, and we can answer questions. And yeah, so I ask you. So. Kann man das noch mal? Can you? Yeah. That you try to find yourself, and this is something art is to find yourself, to find your own identity, and you realize you have many identities. It's not one identity. This is a construction which is not working out, and so we have Gustav Kluge, we have these archaic paintings, and sorry, I'm going the wrong way. And you have an artist like Ebersbach, who is discovering his echo. And in the East Germany, you can remember in the 60s, it was a very repressive regime against art. And they also used the word degenerate art in the 50s already. And so he did a painting really freeing himself, saying, my heart is burning. And he was sent by the secret police. He was really, they were hunting him, and he destroyed the two wings that was triptych, while this in the middle was saved. And you have here Klaus Killisch, also with a Nietzschean idea of burning. You know, I'm burning, I'm really bursting, I'm exploding. And you have Ebersbach again here with a Kaspar, with this puppet figure, or here Narrenschiff, the boat of all this crazy people. And this was an artist group. You can see the names here. The group 37-2, it means the temperature is a little bit higher than normal. And this group was established in Leipzig. It's an art school under the protection of Bernhard Heisig. And that was an experimental group. And this is, for example, Schröder's Sonnenstern, and it took up this, Ebersbach got the idea to this Narrenschiff by this drawing from Schröder's Sonnenstern, who was a famous figure in West Berlin. I think you know him too. He was everywhere, and with a young artist also together. And this is Wolfram Adalbert Scheffler, who comes from Chemnitz, Karl-Marx-Stadt at that time. And it's also this echo story. The echo is floating, and this is a musician, and he wanted to be also a musician, and he was also a kind of dandy, strolling through the city. And this is Springmühl, a friend of Scheffler, who also was in Chemnitz in an empty house, and he's like a crucified figure here, photographed by him. And you have Killisch again, you know, this archaic cry with this death call. And this is Kerbach. I'll show you also examples from the East, because it's interesting. That was the same feeling, and the same feeling in East and West, and I think the same feeling was also in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, in Hungary, and also in the Soviet Union. And so I can imagine that Maija Tabaka was fascinated by that atmosphere and feeling. And this is the last Salome. Blutsturz, blood Salome was a group of the Moritz boys, and this is the last one. He was in the ball with a barbed wire around. So, okay, this is the end of the slideshow.
That was also in that time that we performed, because this painting, what I have done, it was after a photo performance I have done with my boyfriend. And so there is the same feeling about that time. Okay.
Yeah, you see how diverse the scene was and how difficult for the art historian to put an order on that. There is no order possible. And even in this little West Berlin, which was half of the city only, we had all these many groups, and on the other side of the wall, sometimes with contacts or not, the same things happened in Dresden, East Berlin, and then also, of course, in Central and Eastern Europe. And the new idea today is that we realize there was nothing like East and West bloc. There was nothing like abstraction and socialist realism. We have, after the war, through all these decades, on both sides of the Iron Curtain, nearly the same art movements. The artists found ways, underground to communicate, to build networks, sometimes in Yugoslavia, in Zagreb, and founded new tendencies and did nearly the same things. Now we realize it because that was not public in the East, but now when we go to the museums and to the storerooms, we discover all these works, and by moving to West Berlin and contacting all these people, bringing that back, also part of that movement and of this, destroying the order of the Cold War, because all the arts were, of course, part of the Cold War. There were the terms they used, of course, they were used, misused, but artists are like pioneers. They find new ways and they find answers, and they undergo these political structures. Okay, thank you. So.